Let's focus our attention on individual psychotherapy. We've already said a couple of things about individual psychotherapy. The first being that it is usually used to personalize, get to understand the individual's experience with the symptoms, with the associated problems, and how that manifests in daily life, and what are the kinds of objectives that the individual is seeking to accomplish. The second is that individual psychotherapy is usually included in multimodal interventions, which can include pharmacotherapy. It can include group sessions, so group psychotherapy sessions, as well as some skills training in daily life, for example. So in terms of individual psychotherapy, there are main schools of thought about how to conduct such therapies, the main being cognitive behavioral interventions. Cognitive behavioral interventions are interventions that are interested in trying to change some of the associations between thoughts, emotions, and behavior that are probably posing some problems in the individual's life. In another school of psychotherapy, the psychoanalytic or psychodynamic school of psychotherapy, the goal here is to understand the meaning of the symptom and how this meaning is actually leading to some of the psychological suffering that is experienced in the individual's life. And the third school of thought, or if you like, of psychotherapy, is the systemic relational school, which is much more focused on a group's interactions, a system's interactions, within which the symptom may actually play a role. So these will typically involve family therapy sessions or group therapy sessions to understand the dynamics above and beyond the symptom expression, the dynamics of the group that may sustain the expression of a symptom. In the field of ADHD, and especially in clinical research, the perhaps most representative or best studied approach is the cognitive behavioral approach that has randomized controlled trials involving individual psychotherapy with individuals that have the diagnosis. So there's not really any research, or at least to the level of randomized controlled trials that involve either systemic or psychodynamic therapy. So we're going to focus on cognitive behavioral therapy. To focus on this model, we are going to use the Young-Bremen model of psychotherapy, which is usually performed with adolescents and adults and can involve individual as well as group sessions. One useful thing that we can appreciate in this model is the different levels of appreciation of change or preparation to change for any one patient. So Young and Bremen suggest there are about 5 stages of relation to change that one can assess. The first stage is the pre-contemplation stage, where an individual is actually not really ready or not really acknowledging any need for change. Of course, the environment can kind of pressure the individual to get some help or to try to involve himself in change, but in this pre-contemplation stage, individual is not there mentally. Once an individual identifies needs, identifies perhaps some things in life that he'd like to change, then we can say he's more into the contemplation change, contemplating change, saying, well, maybe in this area we could try something. Then moving on, there's the state of, or the stage of preparation to change. In this stage, the individual, you can see, is actually preparing by thinking about domains, perhaps even techniques that one may use to be able to enable change. In the next stage, the action stage, you will actually see the individual performing or really implementing these techniques or these therapeutic propositions in everyday life. And finally, in the change stage, you have an individual that is trying to maintain some of the benefits, maintain some of the adaptations that have been performed so that the symptoms and their consequences may be lessened durably. So now, do you remember the kinds of goals and targets that we talked about in terms of psychoeducation, psychotherapy? We had talked about, first off, the diagnostic symptoms, the processes that sustain the expression of symptoms. And this is going to lead us in individual therapy to make more precise and delineate some objectives. Now, these objectives can be of three kinds. One can have general objectives that are going to lead to some work in sessions. So general objectives could be something like working on motivation to get to work, or working on general motivation to change. And then as we make the objectives more specific, we can have modular sessions or modular goals that actually target symptoms. So for example, we can have a set of sessions that are going to target the specific expression of inattention. Where does inattention occur? When is it likely to occur? How does it occur? We can have a module of therapy that is going to work on inattention. And then we could also have even more specific interventions, which we call specific goals, such as behavioral change that have to do with, I don't know, being late to work, or being forgetful about specific objects. So as you can see, we move from the general to the more specific, and we can kind of switch around in therapy to address some of the problems as they come and as they are contemplated, really, and felt as meaningful to the patient. Moving along now in these psychological interventions, we'd like to specify some of the principles that are involved in cognitive behavioral therapy. So you may know about the ABC model of psychological intervention. So in cognitive behavioral intervention, therapists will use what they call the ABC sequence. A standing for how can we understand the antecedents of a problematic behavior. So A is antecedents, B is the problematic behavior that the individual is contemplating change on, and C is the consequences of this problematic behavior. So you have this chain, in a sense, A, B, C, that both therapists and patient may make a bit more explicit and specific, and then may want to do some work on. So let's imagine a situation where we have an adolescent having some problems at school, especially because he's been getting some criticism about talking too much in class and disturbing class dynamics. He's been thrown out of class. He's been expelled from school because of this behavior. And maybe this adolescent is contemplating, how can I make my behavior a bit better in this context, right? So we're going to identify the antecedents. The adolescent will perhaps say, well, when I'm bored, so being bored, boredom is an antecedent. Another may be, well, when my friends start talking, then I immediately get into it as well. I get into B, I get into the behavior, the problematic behavior. And then the consequences is that, typically an adolescent will say, is that the consequence is that I get thrown out, I get singled out as being the cause of this whole problem, and then I get thrown out of my class and sent to the director's office, for example. So the ABC sequence here is going to help us represent the sequence of events and try to identify some targets where change could be tried, either on boredom, either on the behavior itself, and how at each point there might be something that can be done or can be tried out. So to summarize, psychological interventions in the modality of individual psychotherapy are there to personalize treatment, to work with the individual on sequences of problems, on goals that can be general but that can be also more specific, and work out some of the solutions that can be tried out, implemented in daily life. They involve adolescents, they involve adults in one-to-one interaction, and with children, usually parents are involved to help incur change in real life.